2,500 years ago, a small group of city-states along the rocky shores of the Mediterranean changed the course of human history. This was the world of ancient Greece, where democracy was born, where philosophers asked questions that still shape our lives, and where warriors like the Spartans fought with a discipline that became legendary. From the myths of mighty gods on Mount Olympus to the golden age of Athens, and from epic battles against Persia to the rise of Alexander the Great, ancient Greece was a civilization of brilliance, conflict, and innovation. But what secrets still hide behind its ruins? And how did this culture, though long gone, build the very foundations of the modern world? This is the story of ancient Greece.
Long before the rise of city-states like Athens and Sparta, the people of ancient Greece explained their world through stories. These myths were not seen as fiction, but as a living truth that connected gods, humans, and the natural world. At the heart of Greek mythology stood Zeus, the mighty king of the gods, ruling from Mount Olympus. Alongside him were powerful figures like Athena, goddess of wisdom and war strategy, Poseidon, the unpredictable god of the sea, and countless others who gave shape to every aspect of life. Storms, harvests, victories in war, each was believed to be influenced by the will of the gods. One of the most enduring legends was the tale of the Trojan War, immortalized in Homer's epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey. The story of Paris, Helen, Achilles, and Odysseus became more than a war tale. It was a foundation myth that explained Greek heroism, the dangers of pride, and the role of fate in human life. For generations, these epics were recited orally by bards, keeping alive the values of courage, loyalty, and cunning. Even though historians still debate how much of the Trojan War was real, for the Greeks it represented their shared past and a heroic age that defined their cultural identity. Myths were more than entertainment. They gave meaning to rituals, temples, and festivals. The Olympic Games, for example, were said to honor Zeus. The city of Athens was named after Athena, after a legendary contest with Poseidon. In these ways, myth and religion were woven into daily life. When a Greek farmer planted his crops, he might pray to Demeter for fertility. When a sailor set out to sea, he asked for Poseidon's favor. Through myth, ordinary people felt connected to powers greater than themselves. This deep belief system also shaped the way Greeks viewed themselves as a people. Unlike the centralized empires of Egypt or Mesopotamia, Greece was a collection of small, independent communities scattered across mountains and islands. What united them was not one king or one army, but a shared language, religion, and a body of myths that told them who they were. These stories provided a cultural glue that held together a civilization destined to influence the world for centuries. By the time the first city-states began to emerge around the 8th century BCE, mythology had already laid the foundation for Greek identity. The stories of gods and heroes inspired art, architecture, and politics. Leaders often claimed divine favor. Sculptors carved myths into marble, and playwrights reimagined legendary tales for the stage. Myths explained the origins of justice, the responsibilities of rulers, and the dangers of hubris, making them not only spiritual but also practical guides for society. In short, Greek myths transformed a scattered people into a civilization with a sense of purpose and destiny. They taught the Greeks where they had come from, what values they should uphold, and how their world fit into the grand drama of gods and men. From these timeless stories, the roots of one of history's greatest cultures began to grow.
In the heart of ancient Greece, one city stood out as a beacon of innovation, philosophy, and culture: Athens. Unlike the warrior state of Sparta, Athens became famous for its ideas, its democracy, and its contributions to human thought. The Athenians were among the first in the world to experiment with a system where citizens could participate directly in decision-making. Around the 5th century BC, leaders like Cleisthenes and later Pericles expanded political participation, allowing ordinary male citizens to vote, debate, and even hold office. This system was far from perfect. Women, slaves, and foreigners were excluded, but it laid the foundation for modern democracy. The idea that government should be guided by the people was revolutionary for its time. Alongside politics, Athens was also the birthplace of Western philosophy. Here lived thinkers who questioned the nature of truth, justice, and human existence. Socrates, with his relentless questioning, challenged citizens to think critically about their values. His student, Plato, founded the Academy, one of the earliest centers of higher learning, where he explored ideas about ideal states, justice, and the soul. Plato's student Aristotle carried forward these traditions, laying the groundwork for logic, ethics, politics, and even science. Their combined teachings influenced not only Greece, but also the entire Western world for centuries to come. Athens, in its golden age, became more than just a city-state. It became a symbol of human creativity and intellectual pursuit. The democratic experiments, the philosophical debates, the theaters, and the temples all left a legacy that continues to inspire the modern world. The very concepts of citizenship, critical thinking, and cultural expression trace much of their origins back to the streets of Athens.
The story of ancient Greece is incomplete without the rivalry between its two most famous city-states, Athens and Sparta. They represented two very different worlds and two very different ideals. Athens stood for democracy, philosophy, culture, and art. Sparta represented discipline, military strength, and a society shaped entirely by war. Their relationship shifted from occasional allies to bitter enemies, and their conflicts defined the course of Greek history. Athens and Sparta, opposites in society. Athens and Sparta were both powerful, but their systems could not have been more different. Athens was a democracy, where citizens could participate directly in decision-making. The city thrived on trade, its harbor at Piraeus bringing in goods and ideas from across the Mediterranean. It became a center of philosophy, literature, and science, producing thinkers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Sparta, on the other hand, was a militaristic oligarchy. Its kings and council ruled with strict control, and its citizens were trained as soldiers from childhood. Boys entered the agoge, the harsh Spartan education system, at age 7. Women in Sparta also had more freedom compared to other Greek states, managing households and owning property, while men focused on war. Sparta rejected luxury and wealth, believing discipline and simplicity were essential to preserve their strength. These opposing systems created tension. While Athens celebrated freedom of speech, Sparta valued obedience. While Athenians expanded their influence through alliances and culture, Spartans relied on military dominance and intimidation. This ideological divide laid the groundwork for future wars. The Persian Wars and Greek unity. Before turning against each other, Athens and Sparta had stood side by side against a common enemy, Persia. In the early 5th century BC, Persia launched invasions to conquer Greece. At the famous Battle of Marathon in 490 BC, the Athenians defeated the Persians in a stunning victory. 10 years later, in 420 BC, the Persians returned under King Xerxes. This invasion gave rise to one of the most legendary moments in history, the Battle of Thermopylae. At Thermopylae, a narrow pass between mountains and the sea, a small Greek force led by King Leonidas of Sparta stood against the massive Persian army. Leonidas commanded around 7,000 men, including his famous 300 Spartans. They held the pass for days, inflicting heavy casualties, but were eventually surrounded after a betrayal revealed a hidden path. Leonidas and his Spartans fought to the death, becoming symbols of courage and sacrifice. Meanwhile, Athens played its role at sea. Themistocles, an Athenian leader, convinced his people to rely on their navy. At the Battle of Salamis, the Greek fleet, dominated by Athens, crushed the Persians. Sparta's heroism on land and Athens' naval brilliance at sea saved Greece from conquest. Though the Persian Wars united them temporarily, they also highlighted the competition between Athens and Sparta. Each city-state believed it had proven its superiority, Sparta in bravery, Athens in strategy and culture. The rise of the Athenian Empire. After the Persian Wars, Athens created the Delian League, an alliance of Greek states meant to defend against future Persian attacks. Over time, Athens turned the league into its own empire. Member states paid tribute, and Athens used this wealth to build monuments like the Parthenon. Its navy dominated the Aegean, ensuring trade and power. Sparta grew increasingly uneasy. While Athens was building temples and theaters, Sparta worried that Athenian influence was spreading too far. The two powers represented rival spheres, Athens with its maritime empire and Sparta with its land-based strength. The Peloponnesian War. Tensions finally erupted into open conflict in 431 BC. The Peloponnesian War lasted nearly 30 decades, plunging the Greek world into chaos. It was essentially a struggle between the Delian League, led by Athens, and the Peloponnesian League, led by Sparta. Athens relied on its navy to supply the city and raid enemy coasts, while Sparta relied on its powerful army to invade Athenian territory. In the early years, Athens suffered a devastating plague that killed a large portion of its population, including its leader, Pericles. This weakened the city, but the war dragged on. For years, the conflict seesawed with victories on both sides. Athens scored naval successes, while Sparta relied on Persian financial support to build a fleet. Finally, in 404 BC, Sparta achieved victory. Its army, supported by a new navy, blockaded Athens and forced the city to surrender. Aftermath and rivalry's legacy. Though Sparta had won, the victory was short-lived. The war had weakened all Greece, leaving it vulnerable to future invasions. Athens never regained its old power, and Sparta itself soon declined as well. The rivalry between Athens and Sparta had brought both glory and destruction, and it marked the end of the golden age of Greece. The story of Athens and Sparta is remembered as a clash of ideals: freedom versus discipline, democracy versus military rule, art versus war. Their rivalry created some of the most dramatic moments in ancient history, from the stand of the 300 at Thermopylae to the long and bitter Peloponnesian War. Even in their downfall, Athens and Sparta shaped the world's understanding of power, politics, and sacrifice.
The history of ancient Greece cannot be told without the great wars that defined its destiny. These wars were not only about survival, but also about shaping Greek identity, power, and influence across the world. From the Persian invasions to the bitter rivalry between Athens and Sparta, and finally to the conquests of Alexander the Great, each conflict left a permanent mark on Greek civilization and the world beyond. The Persian Wars. At the dawn of the 5th century BCE, the Greek world faced its first great external threat: the Persian Empire. At the time, Persia was the most powerful empire on earth, stretching from modern-day Turkey to India. Its ruler, King Darius I, sought to expand his dominion westward into Europe and the small, independent city-states of Greece appeared to be easy targets. But what followed was a series of legendary encounters that defined Greek courage and unity. In 490 BCE, at the Battle of Marathon, a vastly outnumbered Athenian army faced the Persians. The Athenians, armed with discipline and strategy, defeated the invaders. Legend tells of the messenger Phidippides, who ran from Marathon to Athens, about 26 miles, to announce the victory before collapsing from exhaustion. His run gave birth to the modern marathon race. Marathon became a symbol of Greek resilience, the idea that free citizens could stand against a mighty empire. The Persian Wars, however, did not end. 10 years later, King Xerxes, son of Darius, launched a massive invasion determined to crush the Greeks once and for all. The famous Battle of Thermopylae in 480 BCE showed the world the Spartan spirit. King Leonidas and his 300 warriors, joined by a few thousand allies, held the narrow mountain pass against Xerxes' vast army. Though they were eventually overwhelmed, their sacrifice inspired all of Greece to continue the fight. Soon after, the Greeks struck back at sea. At the Battle of Salamis, the Athenian-led navy lured the massive Persian fleet into narrow straits where the agile Greek ships destroyed them. The Persians were forced to retreat, and Greece remained free. These victories gave the Greeks a new sense of identity. They were not just city-states, but defenders of freedom against tyranny. The Peloponnesian War. But if the Persian Wars had united Greece, the next great conflict tore them apart. The Peloponnesian War, 431 to 404 BCE, was a brutal struggle between Athens and Sparta, the two dominant powers of Greece. Athens had built an empire based on its navy, wealth, and democracy. Sparta, on the other hand, was a land-based military powerhouse, leading the Peloponnesian League of Allied States. The war lasted nearly 3 decades and involved almost every Greek city-state. It was not only a clash of armies, but also of ideologies: Athenian democracy versus Spartan oligarchy, naval power versus land power. The struggle devastated Greece. Cities were destroyed, populations were reduced, and trust between the city-states was shattered. In the end, Sparta emerged victorious, but its triumph was hollow. The war left Greece weakened, divided, and vulnerable to future threats. Out of this chaos rose a new power, the Kingdom of Macedon. Under King Philip II, Macedon built a strong, disciplined army and began to dominate the weakened Greek city-states. After Philip's assassination, his son, Alexander the Great, inherited the throne and transformed Macedon into one of the greatest empires in history. Alexander, trained by the philosopher Aristotle, was both a brilliant strategist and a visionary leader. In little more than a decade, he led his armies across 3 continents. He defeated the Persian Empire, once the greatest enemy of Greece, in a series of stunning victories at battles like Issus and Gaugamela. He marched through Egypt, where he was hailed as a pharaoh, and all the way to India, where his troops, exhausted, finally refused to go further. What made Alexander unique was not just his conquests, but the legacy he left behind. He spread Greek culture, language, and ideas across the known world. This period, known as the Hellenistic era, saw Greek philosophy, science, art, and architecture blend with the cultures of Egypt, Persia, and the East. Cities founded by Alexander, like Alexandria in Egypt, became great centers of learning and trade. Greek influence now stretched far beyond the Mediterranean. Conclusion. The history of Greek wars and empire is one of contrasts, unity and division, victory and devastation, conquest and cultural exchange. The Persian Wars proved the strength of Greek courage and independence. The Peloponnesian War showed the dangers of rivalry and civil conflict. and Alexander the Great transformed Greece from a land of small city-states into the heart of a vast empire. Through these wars, the Greeks not only shaped their own destiny, but also laid foundations for Western civilization. Their victories, struggles, and ambitions ensured that the legacy of Greece would echo for centuries to come.
When we talk about the legacy of ancient Greece, we are not just speaking about ruins, myths, or old stories. We are speaking about ideas and systems that continue to shape our modern lives. Greece may have fallen as a political power more than 2,000 years ago, but its intellectual, cultural, and political impact is still alive today. The first and perhaps most important legacy is democracy. In Athens, the world saw the birth of a system where ordinary citizens could participate directly in decision-making. While it was limited, only free male citizens could vote, excluding women, slaves, and foreigners. It was revolutionary for its time. The concept that power should come from the people instead of kings or aristocrats became one of Greece's greatest gifts to the world. Centuries later, Rome adopted some of these principles, and much later, modern nations built their governments on the foundations laid in Athens. Every time we see parliaments, elections, or debates in modern democracies, there is a trace of Athens living on. Alongside democracy came the flowering of philosophy. Thinkers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle asked questions that still matter today. What is justice? What makes a good life? How should society be governed? Plato's Republic and Aristotle's works on politics, ethics, and science became textbooks for centuries. These ideas were not limited to Greece. The Romans studied them. Medieval Islamic scholars preserved and expanded them, and later, the Renaissance in Europe brought them back to the forefront of knowledge. Much of Western thought today, from law and politics to education and morality, owes a debt to Greek philosophy. But philosophy was only one part of Greece's intellectual legacy. Science and rational inquiry also began to flourish there. Figures like Pythagoras and Euclid laid the foundations of mathematics. Archimedes made breakthroughs in engineering and physics. And Hippocrates revolutionized medicine with the idea that illness came from natural causes, not curses from the gods. The scientific spirit of observation, questioning, and logical explanation that began in Greece would later be inherited by Rome and then by the scientific revolutions of modern times. Culturally, the influence of Greece extended far beyond its borders. The Roman civilization was deeply shaped by Greece. The Romans adopted Greek gods, Greek art, Greek architecture, and Greek literature. Greek tutors educated Roman elites, and Greek culture became the standard of sophistication in Rome. When Rome spread across Europe, parts of Greek heritage spread with it, laying the foundations of Western civilization. And Greece's influence does not stop in ancient times. In the modern world, we still feel the presence of Greece. The Olympic Games, revived in the 19th century, were inspired by the athletic competitions of Olympia. Modern architecture often borrows from Greek columns and symmetry. Words in science and philosophy often come directly from Greek roots. Even our language of politics, democracy, tyranny, philosophy, politics, is drawn from Greek terms. So why does ancient Greece still live on today? Perhaps because it represents the beginning of something larger, the birth of ideas and systems that humanity would continue to build upon. Greece may have been just a cluster of small city-states, but their creativity, discipline, and curiosity gave the world a new way of thinking. From stories of gods on Mount Olympus to the debates of philosophers in Athens, from the courage of Spartans to the vision of Alexander, the spirit of Greece remains a cornerstone of human history. The ruins of the Parthenon, the writings of Aristotle, and even the democratic systems we live in today remind us of one simple truth. Ancient Greece never truly died. It continues to live in us, shaping how we govern, how we think, and how we imagine our future.